One of the common things I hear all the time, when I was younger, I used to eat just like this and I don't have any problems. So therefore, dear doctor, you're a nut job. I was like, thank you so much. But the problem is that 30 years ago, I'm 50. So like 40 years ago, 50 years ago, the food was not the same. Over the past 50 years, the food industry has added over 10,000 chemicals to our food, especially children's foods, that have not been rigorously studied or studied at all. And a lot of these ingredients are not even allowed in other countries. I lived in New Zealand for a year and a half. And so I did ingredient check. I cooked from New Zealand grocery stores. I was there. I saw it. It is not allowed.
Hi, I'm Kelly Namiro. Welcome to the Balancing Chaos podcast, a lifestyle podcast where we'll talk about wellness, motherhood, and some really exciting things in between. My goal is to help you develop a lifestyle that promotes health, wholeness, and success. Through my conversations with our experts and guests, I hope to inspire you to live a beautiful, full, and joyful life as you navigate balancing the chaos. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Balancing Chaos podcast. Today, we are so excited to have Dr. Anna Maria Temple, MD and renowned pediatrician, bestselling author, and advocate for holistic children's wellness as our esteemed guest today. With over 18 years of experience in pediatric care and a transition into the holistic approach, Dr. Temple has positively impacted the lives of thousands of children and families. Her expertise in treating conditions like eczema and her commitment to personalized healthcare have made her a trusted authority in the medical community. So join us as we delve into Dr. Temple's journey, insights, and mission to elevate family health one individual at a time. Welcome to the show, Dr. Temple.
I'm super excited to be here.
We're really excited to have you. I am so excited because I feel like I haven't met a ton of, when we were looking for our pediatrician when we had our first son, we were really honestly looking for someone with a little bit more of a holistic approach versus thinking, you walk into a doctor's office, you have an ear infection, you get slapped with antibiotics and you walk out the door. Like that approach was what I kind of heard a lot of when I was interviewing pediatricians. And so I can't wait to hear more of your insights.
And I'm also back.
Chad's back on the show.
I took a break for many months.
Yeah.
And I missed it.
Yeah.
I missed you and I missed learning. So I'm really stoked to be back. And I'm very happy to be talking with you today.
Well, good. I'm excited to get both of you.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself. You're a practicing pediatrician in North Carolina, correct?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And so I'm traditionally trained in general pediatrics. And in 2007 is when my epiphany came about. My children at that time, I had 3 kids at the time, and they were sick. They had seasonal allergies. My little one had seasonal allergies that were so bad that when he would walk outside, his eyes would tear, his eyes would swell shut. His body would be covered in hives, and he couldn't get off the ground because he was scratching his body to bleeding from the torment that he was suffering. My daughter had asthma, the eczema, seasonal allergies, recurrent ear infection, constipation, and my middle one had boogers, like the kind of boogers that you're not allowed to be on a plane with these days. It's a miracle he was allowed out of the house. There were not enough tissues in Costco to deal with the snot of this child who also had a lot of symptoms of ADHD. Anyway, one day I took the 3-ring circus to the doctor and I was like, okay, how come my children are all on chronic medications? What is happening? And they're like, well, for the little one, we've run out of medications. He's already on 5 meds for his allergies. The only next step is allergy shots. He was 2 years old. For my daughter, they're like, well, the inhaled steroids will keep the asthma under control. The topical steroids will keep the eczema under control. The Zyrtec will keep her allergies under control. She'll eventually outgrow her ear infections, and Miralax daily will help her constipation. And, a lot of these things she might outgrow, might not outgrow. By the time we got to the middle one with his snot and his ADHD, I frankly stopped paying attention because I was like, wait, this doesn't sound right. And so I walked out of the doctor's office, and I was 5 years in my medical practice at that time. And my doctor self was like, wait, so just more meds? That's our answer here? And my mama warrior self, because she shows up when the children are born. She was like, whoa, 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 whoa. This is not what we're doing. I don't know what the next step is, but this is not what we're doing. We're going to figure something out. And our story is going to end with no meds. And these children are going to be the example that other families are going to heal by. And I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what to do. So, but I was ready for change. And a week later, I went to my children's elementary school where they just had a talk. There was a nutritionist that came and did a talk. And I would go to all the different school events supporting. And of course, I walked in and I'm like, I'm a pediatrician. I know this stuff, but I'm here to support the school. And it was on that Tuesday, 7:30 in the morning, freezing my butt off in a first grade classroom, stuffed in a chair, that the fog lifted and I realized the root cause of my children's chronic disease. All that the lady talked about was sugar. I thought I was feeding my children great because they had strawberries at lunch and broccoli at dinner. I didn't realize the amount of sugar that was hiding in foods, even as a medical doctor. And so over that night, I went home in my stilettos after work, walked into the pantry and threw out the Lucky Charms, the Cinnamon Toast Crunch, the chicken nuggets, the Pop-Tarts, that you name a garbage, my children were eating it. And so that's when I became an outcast in my family. My husband, who was an orthopedic surgeon, was like, what's food got to do with it? You've lost your mind. My friends were like, you're gone. My family was like, we're going to scratch her off the wheel because what is this? And so over the next 5 years, my husband and I fought over food, over how to feed our children. And, my medical partners were like, what are you doing? Where's the evidence? And I was like, I don't know where the evidence is because it was 2007, people. I was like, but it can't be wrong to get rid of processed foods and put more fruits and vegetables into the children's diet. And so over the next 5 years, because when a mama warrior's got a plan, no one stands in the way. And despite the naysayers, I just changed their diet one day at a time, one ingredient at a time. And over the next 5 years, they stopped needing antibiotics. They stopped needing steroids, no more topical steroids, no more inhalers, no more Miralax, no ADHD medicine. We never did allergy shots. My son came off an allergy med, one medicine off each year. So it took 5 years to come off of it. I didn't know what I know now. And, as my children got better, my advice in my medical practice changed, and my parents started asking different questions. So my medical practice overall started taking different shape. But in 2016, my husband and I quit our jobs and we moved to New Zealand with no medical insurance, no medications, no doctors. And I watched my children thrive. They climbed the highest mountains. They bungee jumped off all the bridges. And I saw what it looked like to come back from chronic disease. And when we came back to the United States, I was like, we're doing this differently. We're not going to do the same thing. Our children have taught us how to practice medicine and the true way to do it. And so now I'm here to help inspire, educate, and empower other families to do less medications.
I feel like there is so much that I have to ask you and talk to you about. Like, we've even gone through our own share of conversations around like, what should our kids be eating? What's right? What's going to be the most impactful on their health? But what really stood out to me that I want to talk about first is that intuitive sense within you to recognize hey, there's something not right about this. Were you somebody who personally, when you made that kind of instinctual decision to take away the processed food, to throw away the Cinnamon Toast Crunch and the Lucky Charms and all that, did you eat a lot of processed foods, or were you oh, I'm getting rid of this for all of us, or I know better and I just haven't been necessarily doing that for my kids?
Oh, no. Oh, no. We were all eating the diet. All of us were eating the diet. It's funny because when people go, you don't understand how hard it is to change. I'm like, oh, but I do, my friends, but I do. We were 100% victims of the food industry. And it was fully ingrained in our culture, in our house, in our eating habits. My make at home dinners were frozen things I would get from the grocery store that you open the bag and you put it in a pan. And I was like, oh, there we are. There's my home cooked meal. Oh no, we were all eating it. So we all had to change. And that was the thing. We are all changing. I'm not picking on the one kid who has seasonal allergies. I'm not picking on the one kid who has eczema. We're all doing it. Even the stubborn husband
Yeah.
It was my most difficult client.
I love that. I think that it's like, it's so powerful. He will literally make our meals like from scratch, like cut the potatoes to make them into French fries, use avocado oil, no seed oils, no foods out of bags, because he's so passionate about it, which I truly love about him so much. Because, as a busy mom and even a health coach, like I was the person taking the shortcuts, and he's like, no, 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 this has the most impact on their health. So I would love it if you could talk a little bit to those parents who are listening who have never heard of this before. And they're like the big believers of like, I go into my doctor's office, my kid, this is even like my best friend, and she would not care that I'm saying this, like, because she's told so many people, like her daughter had chronic ear infections where every time they would go, they would just do another course of antibiotics, another course of antibiotics, another course of antibiotics. Finally, one day I was like, you should just take like the dairy and cheese out for a little while and see if that helps. And she's like, she hasn't had an ear infection in forever. Can you talk about how these processed foods contribute to these chronic diseases in our children?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, how long do we have? But we'll make it brief. But if we just start with the preservatives, so one of the common things I hear all the time, when I was younger, I used to eat just like this, and I don't have any problems. So therefore, dear doctor, you're a nut job. I was like, thank you so much. But the problem is that 30 years ago, I'm 50, so like 40 years ago, 50 years ago, the food was not the same. Over the past 50 years, the food industry has added over 10,000 chemicals to our food, especially children's foods, that have not been rigorously studied or studied at all. And a lot of these ingredients are not even allowed in other countries. I lived in New Zealand for a year and a half, and so I did ingredient check. I cooked from New Zealand grocery stores. I was there. I saw it. It is not allowed. P.S. I went to the American store in New Zealand. I was like, ooh, an American store. I'm like, let's go. It was Lucky Charms, Cinnamon Toast Crunch, Twix, Skittles. I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I was so embarrassed. I'm like, wait, this is what we're bringing to the world? This is so atrocious. Anyway, in New Zealand, none of that was allowed. So even the American Academy of Pediatrics has a position statement that says that 10,000 food ingredients in our children's diets are contributing to neurological issues, chronic health conditions like asthma, eczema, allergies. And that is a position paper. And it's asking, dear food industry, please put a regulation on there. Now, we were not taught any of this in medical school. So that position paper has been in the AAP for over a decade. And I don't hear, when I bring this up to other physicians and stuff, they still look at me like I have 7 heads. But we know that preservatives like TBHQ, BHT, BHA, we know that those actually can enlarge the liver, enlarge the kidneys, irritate the brain, not to mention artificial food coloring. Oh my God, if I hear one more person going, oh, red food coloring doesn't have anything to do with ADHD. Lordy, here's the thing. Not 100% of the children are affected 100% of the time by one ingredient. So we can't say, well, my child doesn't have an issue with red dye, therefore that's BS. It's not. A lot of children do have an issue with the red dye. And by the way, those are my favorite. I love the children that are so sensitive. They can't tolerate extra sugar, food coloring, preservatives, because they either have an issue that comes up because you can't fool those bodies. Otherwise, when the children don't have any issues, it seems that they're fine. But it's almost like eating a little poison every little day with a little bit more and a little bit more until the cup overflows. And then all of a sudden, teenage years, now they have anxiety. Now they have depression. Now they're suicidal. Now we're ringing the alarm bells. And sometimes, unfortunately, for some children, it's too late. And the other thing I want to address to all the people that are listening is that we think of a chronic disease in adults as something that happened to us, in our 30s. It happened to us in our 40s. I'm 50. So blood pressure medicine, it just happens. A heart disease at 50 just happens. Chronic disease begins in childhood and shows up in adulthood. And those small ingredients that seem insignificant, a little Lucky Charms, a little Cinnamon Toast Crunch, over the years add up. And then boom, as you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever, all of a sudden now you have chronic diseases that you have to battle and spend thousands and millions of dollars. I mean, hormone issues, infertility issues, those didn't happen yesterday. That's been a long time because the body keeps count. And we don't want to talk about sugar, the amount of sugar in our children's diet that used to be, 1 teaspoon per day 70 years ago, and now it's over 24 teaspoons per day per child, has led to shrinking of the brain, memory dysfunction, inattention, eczema, asthma, allergies, recurrent ear infections, all the different things. And also, to your point, when you talk about dairy and gluten, when people hear that we're health coaches, when the wellness industry, they're like, dairy and gluten, you guys are so annoying. I'm like, yeah, because what is our American diet? Sugar, food coloring, preservatives, dairy, and gluten. Whenever people go, I don't eat that much dairy and gluten, I'm like, okay, cool. So go to the next Thanksgiving get together and be gluten and dairy free. Let me know how that works out. And they're like, you're mean. I'm like, I know.
It's kind of sad because I've really dove into it the past couple of years, and like you kind of go down the line of really like anything that comes out of a restaurant or virtually most things that are CPGs or consumer packaging goods. And you realize that there's pretty much zero regulation with the FDA, at least compared to Europe and other countries as well. And you just find out the more and more things that are in there. Like I never really realized the amount of folic acid, like fortified in cereals, folic acid. And like a kid will go and eat a bowl of cereal and then go to school and he's dumping all that folic acid into his body. It's going to be not so great for his brain and then his longevity, the microplastics. It seems unwinnable at times. That's why I'm so controlled about, what
we do at home.
we do at home. And
Yeah.
I found that like almost everything needs to come from scratch, even from the very primitive level of looking at like seasonings and seeing what's in there. It's challenging. It can be disconcerting at times, but obviously we're all in agreement that has a massive effect. And I think the sad part really is just the sheer amount of education that's required to even know what is or is not bad for you. I feel like that's the majority of people. They just don't really even know.
Yeah.
They think they're eating healthy when they're really not. And that's the saddest part to me. Because many people, not everyone, but many people are trying to do the right thing and trying to do the right thing for the kids. And, they're not even aware. It's sad.
Right. But the marketing is so brilliant. I mean,
Brilliant.
I have to give it to I gotta give it to I'm always like, great job, Chick-fil-A, great job, all fast food places. Gatorade, hi, amazing marketing. I mean, 4-year-olds on the sports field, they're like, oh my God, we need electrolytes immediately for the 30 minutes that they sat and picked flowers in the field. You know what I mean? It's like, but the parents are literally terrified, like, oh, without electrolytes, how are they going to go on? I'm like, grapes have electrolytes, orange slices, and they were out there for 10 minutes, for like 30 minutes, and they'll be okay.
The agricultural industry did the same thing with meat forever. Like there's a really large swath of Americans that like don't think protein exists in anything outside of meat. And that's like totally by design. And I eat meat, but I'm very careful about what kind of meat, but I also accept that there's many other protein sources, many of which are in vegetables. So yeah, it's no different than, to be honest, a meta engineer designing Instagram to be the most addictive, it can possibly be. That's how food's designed to be addictive when it hits your tongue via sugar, etc. So
we talked like a couple weeks ago on the show to a food expert, like about that whole role of like food scientists and how they design these like ultra palatable foods for us as adults. And obviously it's also happening in what's going on with our children and how the foods are marketed to them, how they're packaged, how they're brightly colored, where they're placed on the shelves, all of these different things. But what I'm curious about, and you've mentioned sugar a few times, because we've talked to so many experts on the show about like, okay, if we're gonna, I think we want to make it manageable for people, right? We want to make it easy for people, especially if you have a kid with a chronic condition and like you're dealing with that and you're managing that and you also have work and a job. It's like, what do we get rid of first? Like, is it sugar? Is it seed oils? Is it gluten? Where do we start?
all of it.
Yeah. So, when because it's overwhelming, it's kind of like people, they're like, I'm not going to do anything. Because when you're in an overwhelmed state, we often don't do anything.
Yeah.
But I tell people, I was like, I've been learning for this wait a minute, 17 years. I got to do math really quick. 17 years I've been working on this. It's not like I learned this in one day. I was like, and now I know everything. I'm like, no. The first ingredient was, I think, was like red food dye. Okay, cool. So we're gonna go ahead and get red food dye. I got blue, I got yellow. Okay, cool. And then I figured that out. And then after that, I was like, oh, caramel colors next, because then it's like a domino effect. Then I was like, oh, an anticolor color. I'm like, what is that? And then it was like the preservative. So what I tell everybody, I was like, we want to hit the processed foods and the sugar first. But let's step back before, because parents are very afraid, and justifiably so, to be a no culture. Don't eat that. Don't do this. Don't touch that. Don't move. Don't run. Don't, attack the dog. Stop touching your sibling. I mean, it's like, no, 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 no. So one of the things I propose is that, right? We've all been there.
We talk about
one of the things I propose, like, okay, how about we start being a yes culture? So we're going to say, so the way I started with my kids, I'm like, all right, well, before I rip that was a really fun story about me throwing all the food out, but that's not what happened. What really happened was that I go, let me bring in fruits and vegetables. So for example, for breakfast, I was like, okay, well, they're going to need to eat they're going to force fruit upon them and then fill their bellies with good food, but not make the Lucky Charms evil, bad, or a no-no, but they could have their Lucky Charms after they eat their smoothie. Oh, but dear doctor, how are we going to get a child who is addicted to sugar to eat smoothies? Oh, what I did was I did milk, dairy, I did whole fat, organic milk, and I did ice cream. Stay away for it. And then I added strawberries, because I told my kids, who wants strawberry ice cream for breakfast? They're like,
Yeah.
best mom ever. I'm like, I know. And so they started drinking that. And then I would say, oh, and after that, you can have your Lucky Charms. Now you're like, wait, what are you saying? But over time, then I added a little spinach. Then I took away the ice cream and I added yogurt, and it was vanilla yogurt. Yes, no sugar. Over time, I started substituting the vanilla yogurt for plain yogurt. Then I took away the milk and we did oat milk. Then we added mangoes and we added cherries and then we added avocado. And it was like, but it was a slow process of Jedi mind tricks, because we know that the taste buds die, a third of our taste buds die every 30 days. In 90 days, you have new taste buds. If you have the patience, the perseverance, and you just stick with it, you will change your children's taste buds. So what ended up happening, my children started and I started with small smoothies, so it wasn't overwhelming, especially selective eaters. I have one was very selective in particular. You have to start small, tiny, fun cup, whatever. We made a whole game out of it. It was a fun experience. Everyone's drinking their smoothie. And over time, they stopped eating their Lucky Charms. Over time, the Lucky Charms never even left the pantry. Over time, it doesn't mold because there's so many preservatives, but it just sat in the museum, the pantry, until I eventually threw it out. So then I did, let's do more fruits and vegetables. Before snack, I was like, oh, you want a packaged snack now, dear children? Anything in a package is not that good for us, but something that grows from the ground is great. So to earn the right to a packaged food, you're going to have to eat a fruit or a vegetable. And if they were like, nah, we don't want to eat it, then I was like, well, then you're not that hungry. So no snack for you, no problem, because nobody needs snacks. We could eat 3 meals a day. And then after they would eat a package, because I would do portion control, I taught them portion control. So yeah, they would have to count out the Cheez-Its. I'd make them look. I'm like, all right, so a serving of Cheez-Its is 19. And I'd make them count 19 crackers. I'm like, that's what a serving size is. Yeah. And then when they would finish that, they're like, I'm hungry. I'm like, still need a fruit or a vegetable. After you play outside for an hour, and then you can come back in. So then we added some movement, no screens, but it was like instead of a no, I was like, of course you have another snack, but first we play outside. But first we eat a fruit and vegetable. And now you can have your snack. And then over time I removed the Cheez-Its and I replaced those. And it was, again, a 17-year journey.
You have to be willing to work with the way that children's minds work. But what I thought was the most fascinating about what you just said was the taste bud thing. Like that to me is like, I didn't realize that
makes sense.
A third of your taste buds die and you can create these new palates. Because I've heard someone say, who is like a nutrition expert with children, that like it takes up to 6 times of a child trying a new food for them to actually decide whether or not they like it, because so many kids, like my older son Wes is a perfect example. It's like we try to get him to try asparagus, and then we tried again, and then we tried again, and then finally, like the fourth or fifth time, he's like, oh, I really like this. Like, and it's really, really interesting how that whole process works. So I thought that was fascinating.
I
So,
believe it, because I used to like sweet things like everyone else, and now I can't really stand them. And you just go longer and longer without them, and then your taste buds adapt. And then I find that like if you've been eating more clean and more holistic, and then you go
Don't even
back
crave
to
that
the
stuff.
processed foods, makes you feel way worse. It kind of has like you just kind of feel icky while you're eating it, even, or at least I do. But my question is, it's two questions. One, and we talk about this, and I kind of struggle with this. Do you think it's okay to use food as a mechanism of positive reinforcement with kids, assuming it's like, healthier food? And then at what age? Because what we're trying to do with Wes, he's 4, is trying to teach him like this is healthy, this is not. For the most part, he doesn't really care. He's like, I just want sugar. But I grew up in that environment, and I kind of went off the path. I grew up very strict, like vegan, no sugar, very strict. So like I deviated, but then I ultimately came back, and I think it's a lot of my childhood and that kind of thing. So I would love to think that what we're teaching him and telling him is healthy versus not healthy is gonna have an impact. I guess the question is like at what age you see kids maybe even start to understand the connection between what they're eating in their body and start to care about it. Sorry.
well, so multi-level. So one, I started this when my kids were like, what, 2, 4, and 6. And, initially there's always a fight back. But here's the thing, there's an inertia to the children. They're not going to prepare their own food. My kids are 22, 20, and 17. I just recently, like as in 4 days ago, I was at the mountains with Evan, and that's my youngest, and his 4 dudes. And they ate what I brought, which was, you can believe, there was a lot of vegetables and fruits, and I eat gluten-free bread. So they had gluten-free bread and dairy-free cheese. And, I heard them go, they're like, we need to distract the parents, take the car and go to the store and get stuff. And I was like, I can hear you. Like, I'm like right behind you. And I was like, oh, by the way, you guys drove your own cars to the mountain. You have your own keys, your own driver's licenses. You drove here. You can go to the store at any time. And they're like this. I mean, we were going to go to Cookout last night after. I wasn't that hungry. And another one was like, I was tired. And another one's like, it was 20 minutes down the mountain. My point, the inertia of the humans, the little humans, is going to always win over their desire for the sugar if it's not there. So what I would do as we changed our life is I just didn't have it in the house. If they would go to someone's house, I was, whatever, I don't care. And if they're like, I ate Doritos at my friend's house, cool. Yeah. I'm not, I'd always tell everyone, Botox face, because they're trying to get a rise out of you. They're trying to instigate you. So, because they know it's annoying to you, right? And so that's what they're doing, because they're trying to push limits. But the purpose of children is to annoy us. And I mean this in the nicest way, to push boundaries, to push the limits, because they're testing, right? They're every day it's an experiment for them. Is mom going to blow up? Is dad going to blow up? What can I do to be really annoying? And then when everything is nice and cool, calm in your house, they probably go at it. And you're like, what? But my point is that at home, if you have stuff, which you already do, like it's prepared, when the kids come in from school, I'd always have, one of the days I wasn't working, if not my nanny was home, but they would always have food that was cut up on the counter. So it would intercept before they would go to the pantry, because that's where they want to go, because that's where the stuff is. Before the pantry, they would be like, ooh, strawberries that have been already cut up, and I have to put 0 effort in, except put it in my mouth. Oh, celery sticks. All right, I don't feel like it, but it's right there, and it's cut up. They are going to gravitate towards least work, least resistance. So we just have to intercept them. Yes, it takes effort, 100%, but that was my mission, and it's my love language. I was like, I will feed you. I still make my 17-year-old's lunch, and it's going to sound weird, but I know that when I make his lunch, he has like 20 plant points in his lunch, because I'm in charge of it, and he will eat anything I make. If he has to make it, he's like, I'll get DoorDash. No bueno, not happening under my watch. Yeah. But what I taught them was, you go out with your friends, do you do you. You come home, you have belly pain, we're going to discuss. Why do you think you have belly pain? And I didn't say, oh, it's because you ate. I made them come up with that. Why do you think what do you think your belly hurt? What'd you do with grandma this weekend? Oh, we went Taco Bell. I mean, she gave me soda because, she said, I don't have a happy childhood. And for me to have a happy childhood, I need soda. I'm like,
Grandparents rule.
yeah, thanks, mother-in-law. I was like, oh, really? Okay. So do you think like anything else that could have contributed to your belly pain? And I remember my middle one, he was 7. He's like, I mean, the only thing different is God, that soda and that Taco Bell. And I'm like, oh, you think? Maybe. Okay. Because it was his idea. And then he's like, what can I do for this belly pain? I'm like, nothing. There's no medicine for that. There's no antidote for Taco Bell. Like you just have to, the body has to get rid of it. It's going to take a few days. Oh, by the way, you're still going to school with a belly pain because we know what it's from. And let me tell you something. That was the last time that boy ate Taco Bell. And he's 20. He has his own money. He's in college, does not drink soda.
Yeah.
And he's cooks for himself,
All comes back around. Yeah.
I love what you said too, because one of the things that we do with our older son, that is positive reinforcement for him is the plant points. And like, I love that you still do that with your 17-year-old, because the moment that we started doing that, like he'll come home from school, and he came home from school today, and I packed in his lunch broccoli and blueberries and beans, like black beans. And he's like, how many plant points do I have? And I was like, well, you got 2 at breakfast and 3 at lunch. And so now you have 5. And he loves, like, 1, the positive reinforcement, but 2, like, and this sounds, I don't know how healthy this is, but like the competition with his brothers, like how many plant points does Enzo have? And I'm like, we talk about it, and it's like that part is exciting for him, and it gets him to want to eat more healthy food. So I think that doing that too for anyone out there is something that is really, really been a success for us.
Yeah. And I do want to answer too. I love that so much because I love the plant point challenge. My favorite. It's the amount of children that have gotten to eat more plants because we do that. But your other question was about rewarding children with food. Yeah. I try to not reward with food because I want to relay the message that food is here for us to live. We don't live to eat. We eat to live. And so it is a privilege that we have food. Food is expensive. Food, it takes a lot of effort. It's not a toy. So I try to use other things for incentives, quality time being the number one thing that children, the love language of all children, 99% of children is quality time. And so that is always a great reward for whatever you need to do. And especially one-on-one with one of the parents is like the panacea.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, we started doing a thing to get our older son to sleep in his own bed. And it was like, okay, how can we positively reinforce him? So he would get to pick a prize in the mornings. And it was like the choice between like a $1 like slap hand or like whatever. And then like other things were quality time with one of us. And the first prize that he chose was to go skiing with his dad, because like quality time does win. That's what they're ultimately looking for, especially even when they're like leaving their bed to come into your bed. They want quality time with you. So I think that you saying that it's the ultimate truth.
Hi, I'm Kelly Namiro, your host, certified holistic hormone coach, and Pilates instructor for the WBK method. You can consider me your guide in helping you curate the very best version of yourself from the inside out. Feeling physically better by optimizing your hormones, to feeling mentally and emotionally better by creating a more deep and grounded connection with yourself. I get questions all the time in my DMs about things like, what supplements should I be taking for my menopause symptoms? Or is it normal that I'm always exhausted? My doctor said that's what happens as I get older. Or maybe I gained 20 pounds in the last couple of years and I have no idea how to lose it. And even I'm chronically bloated and I've tried every elimination diet. Please help. But here's the thing. There are no quick fixes out there. Until you know the root cause of what's going on in your body and you use precision supplementation, a targeted diet, and mindset and lifestyle changes that are specific to your unique circumstances and lab values, you're never going to be able to heal. Throwing just random supplements that make all these promises or a restrictive diet at a weight issue is never going to work because it's not focused on what's going on internally with you. And often we can make the problem worse when we do these things. And that's why I've created the WBK Lab Review Package. In this package, you'll receive lab kits and a custom lab form based on your symptoms and health history. Once you've completed the saliva kit for your adrenals, the stool kit for your gut health, and the blood tests for your hormones and other health markers, we'll sit down together and create a customized plan that will help you balance your hormones in a holistic way so that you can lose weight, have more energy, maintain a balanced mood, and achieve the results that you've been wanting. This year, it is time to get the results that you've been dreaming of because you're targeting your unique system. If you're ready to experience more energy, comfort, confidence in your body, and relief from those nagging symptoms that have been bringing you down, I would love to support you in doing just that. This program includes a one-on-one call between you and me, all of the labs needed to create your customized protocol, and a PDF with your unique plan that you'll be following going forward so that you can take your time in implementing your new diet, supplements, and lifestyle changes. To learn more about this, head to the link in the show notes or go to wellnessbykelly.com to learn more about the WBK Lab Review.
I want to shift gears a little bit though and talk a little bit about some of the conditions that we were mentioning at the beginning. And I also want to save a little bit of time for us to talk about vaccines as well, because I'm very interested on your take on all of that. And it's one of the most asked questions that I get on my page, but just in terms of like conditions like eczema, or like anything with skin, psoriasis, even like ear infections. At least from what I understand, there's some interplay within gut health and some of these chronic skin conditions. Are you a believer in that? And like, if someone was to come out, like, let's say I have a friend, for example, who has a child who, you know, she gave birth and literally at like 6 months, 3 months even, like the baby has eczema. Is that from the microbiome of the mom? Like, what's causing that to come up at such a young age where you're not even eating real food yet? You're eating breast milk and you have eczema.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So again, a whole nother podcast we can do. So the great news is like my niche is actually eczema. And so I work with families with eczema. And so that's a super common question. The most common time for eczema to develop is actually between 3 and 6 months of age.
Wow.
And it is often disregarded as like normal part of childhood. It is not normal. It is not normal for children to have eczema. And then parents are blown off and they're like, oh, they'll outgrow it. Just put some steroids or find the right moisturizer. Again, can some kids do okay with just a moisturizer and be on their way? Absolutely. But that's not the majority. And eczema is an issue from the inside. I often say eczema is not a lotion deficiency. Eczema is an issue from the inside out. And if you don't heal from the inside out, you're just masking the problem. And the reason eczema starts between 3 and 6 months because of the moms and dads stories. And if people are like genetics, I'm like, genetics is only part of the story. Genetics load the gun and the environment pulls the trigger. But because, you know, when we look at eczema, if one parent has eczema, it increases the child's risk by 40%, not 100%. So I mean, 40 is a big number, but it's not 100%. And so what else is happening? So if the mom or dad in their younger years had antibiotics for recurrent ear infections, if they ate a lot of processed foods, because antibiotics is in meats, like to your point earlier, so it's 60 to 80% of our antibiotic exposure is actually from meat. Yep. And they had acne, they had UTIs, they were on antidepressants, they were on steroid for their asthma, they had all these other things. That is the body keeps count, and that is changing the microbiome of both mom and dad, because it's not just mom, right? Because it takes two to tango. And so we have that. Then we have maternal stress. There was a great study for anyone that is nerdy like me, or you want to Google it, look up the Great Ice Storm of Canada in 1996, where they actually followed pregnant moms that were displaced by the ice storm. It was over 300,000 pregnant moms that were displaced. And they compared those moms to moms in Canada who were never displaced. And they followed them out for 15 years. The moms who endured the stress of the displacement had children with higher rates of eczema, asthma, cancer, autism, neurological issues, diabetes, and so on. So the stress during pregnancy playing a huge role. And in our American culture, it is way underplayed, even though like, oh, we meditate. Oh, I go for a walk. Oh, no. I lived in a country in New Zealand. We realized that we are completely nutso. When I speak about my family very kindly, we're completely cray-cray. Like people were like, what is wrong with you guys? We're like, what? We're so chilled. Anyway, and so you realize what a high level of stress when you live in another country. You almost can't even see the stress in our country living here because, right, you keep up with the Joneses.
Yeah.
Right, everybody's.
Yeah.
So then, we have toxic mold, we have yeast. I mean, I have so many moms that are like, during pregnancy, I just want to eat ice cream. And we're like, yay, you're pregnant. Normally. And now I'm like, whoa, that's yeast. Oh, I had recurrent yeast infections during pregnancy. They just said it's pregnancy. I'm like, that's yeast coming out. So like, whoa, that didn't get treated. What's happening? And then, we have nutrient deficiencies. To your point earlier, we were talking about the nutritional depletion in the soil. So the soil, the farming techniques, we don't have magnesium. There's no zinc. We're not getting our B vitamins. We're not getting the important nutrients that are needed to make good skin. So even if the mama is trying to eat like really good foods, but if she's eating foods from a depleted soil, she's not actually getting the micronutrients she needs. And I always tell people, they're like, what lotion? Because that number one question I get, what lotion do I get? I'm like, you can't put lotion on zinc deficiency. If you have a zinc deficiency, you can put all the cream on your skin that you want to. You're not going to heal it because you're not healing the zinc deficiency, the vitamin D deficiency, the microbiome. If you have too many bad guys and you have too much yeast and not enough good guys, again, you can put as much lotion as you want. You can't fix it because we haven't fixed the microbiome to a healthy state where it can send the right signals to the skin and not be inflamed and leaky.
I think it's just like educating people on the role of some of these things and how interconnected like it all is, I think is the first step in allowing people to choose alternative modalities to heal their kids. And I think this is like this kind of work where we're sharing, it's really important. So
I just always try to bring it back to like, what did our ancestors do?
Yeah.
Right. And that, I don't want to go on a tangent here, but if you think about like exposure to the elements or cold plunging, like that makes sense. They didn't have all the clothes and, ability to be warm 24/7. And so they had different exposure to that. And that's good for you. What were they eating? They were
real food,
a lot of foliage. Like there wasn't, you can all bring it back, even like earthing or just, stepping on the ground and magnetizing your body. I mean, it all like makes sense. And that stuff always seems to align with like what ends up being good for you. And these new technologies and, with heavy marketing teams always end up being, I would say, less good. I found out recently, you mentioned B vitamins. It's like, again, finding things out like on a daily basis that the formula we're giving Enzo, it's a pretty good one. It's called Bobby. It's organic. It was made by a few moms. It's very hard to get baby formula approved, as you know, through the US. But they use cyanocobalamin, which is a version of B12 that has trace amounts of cyanide. It's like, what? I mean, no one would know that.
Doing like either it was like a healthier version of like way healthier than what you're, Similac or something else. But it's like, it's so hard with stuff that's packaged.
We honestly struggled to, and still struggle like to this day, to find someone who is even like a little more holistic.
Yeah.
It's very like, my dad's a doctor. He says, treat him and street him. It's a very good statement. Right. And so I've taken antibiotics once in my life because my dad was like so against it unless it was very, very needed. I understand that not everyone's going to be that fortunate, if you will. But my point is, for our 4-year-old son, and we feel like we even have a bit more of a progressive pediatrician, I think he's been prescribed antibiotics, prescribed. Like 15, 20 times. He's had it once. So you start to realize like you kind of need to be your own doctor. So my question for you is like, how do you feel like your field is waking up to these things a little bit, or it's still very much caught in like the traditional, medical school education and, treating the symptoms and not the disease kind of thing?
Well, so I mean, overall, I feel like the system's still very ingrained. I will tell you that the newer physicians coming out of medical school, out of residency, they're questioning stuff, because I've had more and more great conversations with physicians who are like, wait a minute, it doesn't seem to make sense. Hold on a second. And so, they see it's very difficult. I am not accepted in the traditional practices with my approach to eczema. They think that I'm a complete wackadoodle and that I'm causing food allergies. They're like, well, you tell people to, we're removing dairy for 3 to 6 months and then bringing it back in, and we're healing the gut. And so, that's not the end of the world, but they're like, that you are the reason food. I'm like, eczema, if you have eczema, you have a 30% risk of developing food allergies. Is it me though? Is it? Or is it the fact that we're not treating the gut? So it's not very well, so it's not accepted. I mean, even in my former practice, I try to, I sent him a message. I'm like, I would love to come to your journal club and share with you the medical research behind my online eczema program and why we're doing the steps that we're doing. And they're like, no, thanks, we're not interested. So it's almost like, and I'll be on podcasts of lovely folks, lovely pediatricians who are trying to be open-minded. And after we talk about eczema at the end, I recorded, at the end of it, they're like, yeah, I mean, that sounds really great, but I'm an evidence-based doctor. So I don't know how I feel about what you do. And I'm like, what? It's like, it is, even if when you present the data, it's so ingrained and it's frustrating, but it is changing. So I'm sounding like I'm a poo-poo naysayer or whatever. It is changing. There's more people looking at alternatives. There's more people questioning the status quo. It is happening. It's just slow. And we need more. We need more people to talk about it. Here's the other problem is that when you work for a major hospital, so when I worked for the major hospital and I was changing my practice, you have 10 minutes. Right? Treat them and treat them. You have 10 minutes.
True. Yeah.
And in 10 minutes, I mean, I'd be like, all right, we're going to work on Lunchables. That was literally our appointment, lunch. And then, but here's the other thing. Now you got to come up with an ICD-10 code, blah, blah. It's the code that gets the medical insurance to pay the bill that you saw the doctor. So if you can come up with an ICD-10 code like ear infections, there's no ICD-10 code for Lunchables. There's not an ICD-10 code for less Gatorade. And so you have to come up with like, okay, well, what disease did we talk about in our appointment? Because that's the only thing the medical insurance covers in a practice, right? And they only pay a pediatrician. So let's say you, the parent, pay $180, like your bill comes and it's $180 or $230. They pay the pediatrician like $25 or $40 for that visit. That's not what's getting the money. So you're having a doctor who is getting underpaid, who has 10-minute opportunity to talk to you, and then has a waiting room of people that are like, well, you're falling behind because you want to ask one more question, because you're there, but they're like, oh, I'm watching the clock. I mean, do you know how much time? This is so awful. We got trained on how to give the impression that we're spending more time than we were. We had how you sit in front of the computer, what question you ask, all these little tips and tricks to make it seem that we've spent 30 minutes instead of the 10 minutes. I'm like, how about instead of that, teach us how to change people's mind about sugar?
Yeah, it's not, I know there's a bit of a shortage in doctors, so that's something, but it's just it's the fact that we're so sick and so kids are going. That's another thing we've learned with our second child, that you don't need to go to the pediatrician nearly as often as you think. You can probably stay at home and, treat them that way. And so, yeah, it's just it's a volume thing, how could you treat all these people and spend like that amount of time with them? So, I get it.
Yeah, it's definitely tough. We actually did, like, speaking of like a hospital, we had like an ER visit like recently, and it was, we were there for 7 hours, and
that's bad as it gets.
We left with like basically zero answers. And it's exactly that methodology of like, okay, how do we get them out of here as fast as possible? And then like just send them, recommend that they go to a specialist afterwards, because we can't really like do much. So I really want to get to this question because I think it's really, really important. And this is one of the, things that I get asked most highly about, but I am not an expert. One of the decisions that we made together as parents when we first had our son, and now we're about to have our third, is we wanted to do a delayed vaccine schedule for all of our kids. We wanted to
it's pretty much based on Dr. Sears' book,
The Vaccine.
I'm sure you've heard of it. I'd love your opinion on.
And I think that you're the expert here, obviously, not us. But what you see in Europe is, they'll do one vaccine at a time, and they're not doing vaccines like all clustered together where you're getting like 3 at once or things like that.
The schedule's different, and then the vaccines are different.
Yeah. So I would love your take on the reality of like, what's the risk versus reward? We're not anti-vaccine. We're just thinking about the implications.
Children have never had, even the slightest reaction.
Right.
So,
give us your take.
Great. Awesome. All right. Whew. My God, we can have like 10 podcasts from our chat.
I know.
patient comes in, what do you recommend they do? Is it pediatric, schedule or yeah.
Right. So I'm pro vaccines and I'm pro choice and I'm pro doing them cerebrally. I do believe that vaccines have side effects, and we are not paying it as a medical community. We are not paying enough attention to the side effects, and we're easy to dismiss a side effect if that's just what happens, rather than kind of really thinking a little bit more about it. So number one is the first thing that I am very good at is we have open communication. So you can bring me any question like, I read this study and blah, blah, let's go. I don't think this is right. Let's go. Like, let's talk about it. It is very difficult to have an open conversation, like really anywhere. I can't even have it on Instagram. I get taken out because I'm in the middle. I'm not like all the way pro, all the way anti. I got taken out so many times, and I refuse to be censored by the community. That's not going to happen here. Because I was like, and then people yell about censorship. I'm like, you're literally trying to censor me because you don't like what I said. So, right, when you're in the middle, it's a very difficult, very hard place to be because no one's your friend. And so what I say is like, we have to have an open a place where we can have open communication, address the underlying concerns. What are your concerns? What are your concerns as parents? I have parents who are like, when the polio thing came, and there was one person with polio in Rockland, New York, and they found the polio in the sewage, and they were like, we're about to have an epidemic. I'm like, we all need to relax for a second. But I had parents that couldn't get past that. They're like, I know that my child is going to get polio. Okay, well, you and I are having a very different conversation than my parent who's like, where's polio? I don't have any polio. I'm not getting any polio. Why we don't talk about polio? That's a different conversation. So I don't have the same conversation with every parent, because if you can't sleep at night because there were 9 cases of measles in Philadelphia, we need to talk about that, because your mental sanity, your comfort, and how you raise your children is different than the person who's like, I'm just going to get natural disease and I'm okay with the consequences. That's very different conversations, and you can't. So it is very personalized. As a general rule, we don't, I'll tell you, I don't start immunizations till if you're in daycare, 6 months. If you're at home, not until 1, because the reasons for the vaccines are to protect you when you go into daycare and or you're traveling the world. That's when you're on a cruise. Okay, that we have a different conversation again. But if you're at home, you live in a bubble, you're working from home, or maybe you travel a little bit, but it's still, you're living in a bubble when you don't go to daycare. That's a different conversation. So we don't start until a year. And the reason I do that is because I'm waiting to see, did eczema show up? If eczema shows up between 3 and 6 months of age, we are not doing vaccines. The body's on fire. The body's telling us something is not right. And we need to pay attention, because if we don't pay attention, we just push through, then we're going to have bigger problems. If I sense a neurological issue, which I just had a youngster who was doing great, mom's like, let's proceed with vaccines. All was good. And all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute, that's not right. The mom's like, oh, I think maybe he's doing some autistic stimming. I'm like, pop, 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 no vaccine, no more vaccines. Hold. What's happening? Why is this happening? And again, and we're able to turn it around immediately with an approach of like because you know what to do when this happens. But it wasn't the vaccine. Something was already in place. Mom's like, he's been like this, but now it's more pronounced. So I'm not suggesting that the vaccine changed it. But because we do one at a time, we didn't overwhelm the system. We didn't overload the child's nervous system. So let's say the vaccine was going to trigger something. When you do 3 or 4 vaccines at one time, that child would have had a different story, perhaps. I don't know. That's not what we do. And so we listen, we pause, and we regroup. Okay, what is our next action plan? Our next action plan is like, oh, that just happens. We're like, no. And so when I've had vaccine adverse events, because of course they happen, is we stop, we pause, we rebuild the body, and the symptoms resolve, and we're back on track. We're not devastated. The devastation happens when we're not listening, not paying attention, and we keep going.
And like a normal vaccine schedule, aren't there like, it's like the 6-month appointment or the 12-month, but one of them is like recommended like maybe 5 or 6 shots at once, right?
So it's like at birth at 1 month, 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. And at 2, 4, and 6, they're usually a combo vaccine. So they're usually between 3 and 4 shots at 2, 4, and 6.
Yeah.
And it depends, including one of the combo vaccines. And that's just simply way too much for a human body. If we need them because you're traveling, we got to space them out so the body can actually go, okay. You know what I tell people? I'm like, but vaccines are inflammatory. That's the job of the vaccine. And if it's not inflammatory enough, then it doesn't produce enough antibodies. So then it doesn't protect you. Because when people are like, no, vaccines are not inflammatory. What? That's the whole point of the vaccine. That's the whole reason you have aluminum in vaccines, is to cause the inflammation to get the immune system to respond.
Why are we doing that? Like, I get like the super vaccines kinda in terms of like, DTaP and MMR all being combined, but like, why are we doing multiple shots at one visit? Like, why is that not spaced out? Like, I don't understand.
Is it a cost savings?
Yeah, what's driving that?
Well, so number one is that there's this belief that parents are not going to come more than the amount of time. So it's usually be like, all right, so when they arrive, you have to get them with a vaccine. So like if they come in for a question, like they're constipated, like do a vaccine. I'm like, if the child's constipated, you don't do vaccines. You need to poop because you need to detox. And so there's like, they're not coming, also covered by the visits, also insurance driven. And I'll tell you, when I was seeing patients in 10-minute increments, I was seeing 28 patients a day. You cannot sit and have a conversation about each vaccine and each ingredient. You can't. So we would have literally like my day would be lined up with who's coming. All the vaccines were ready. Everybody knew what vaccines everybody's getting. So as you're putting into the room, you're doing your developmental questionnaire, you get your shots, then you come in and you do your questions and in, out we go, 10 minutes, boom, perfect, go next. And so it was incredibly well organized in order to keep up with such a pace and the demands that were put on me and my partners from the hospital system.
Dr. Temple, I swear, I wish you lived here, because this is the most refreshing conversation around vaccines that I've ever had. And I have to tell you, I love the fact that you're in the middle, because most people will be like, well, why did you wait till they're 2? Because we waited till they were 2. We actually just did my second son. We did his first vaccine on Wednesday. And I'm a big believer, they should get these things. They should, we should do our part in preventing other kids from spreading diseases. That being said, I didn't want to do it too young. I didn't want to start when they were, 1 day old at the hospital, and you're giving them a hepatitis shot. And then you're going in a month later and you're, adding all these things into their little teeny tiny bodies where we don't know what the impact is. And so honestly, I've never felt so aligned with someone on this conversation. And that's not what podcasting is about. I want to hear different people's different opinions, but I just feel like this conversation was so refreshing, and I really appreciate your insight. So
yeah, I feel like in most cases it's actually the parents that are driving the change, at least in my experience.
I see that
kind of finding a pediatrician that will
align with
adapt to what you want them to do. Are there any that you don't recommend? Because obviously the just sheer amount of vaccines have radically changed over the decades.
HPV, chickenpox, all these new things. Is there anything that you don't recommend?
No, I mean, more vaccines, more money makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah.
Is this just yeah.
So the, one of the things that a lot of people might be afraid of also delaying is they think that if you delay, then you have to get everything at 2. Everything.
You get way less shots. Yeah.
Right. So what happens is you outgrow. So the 2-month vaccines that you didn't get, you outgrow those. If you didn't get them at 4 months, you outgrow those. So those are for specific time frame. And once you get to 1 or 2, those you've outgrown a lot of them. So you don't have to catch up with every single vaccine that you didn't get from when you were born. So I just want to because that's a big fear that people are like, oh, but I'm going to have so many to catch up on. Right. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
And so the ones that really upset me is that we're the only country that still has COVID vaccine for children on the required vaccinations. The only country in the world. Shame on us.
So happy
and after all the data, and in fact, the fact that the FDA, they were as 23-2 vote against the second dose of the COVID vaccine, especially for teen boys due to myocarditis. And they still were like, well, we're just going to do it anyway. what are we doing? For the people that come after me, like, where's your medical evidence behind eczema? Really? Let's go. Let's talk about the medical evidence behind the COVID vaccine. I mean, let's go for it. So I have an issue with that. And also now the new RSV vaccine also got fast tracked. I sat on the phone with Sanofi. My husband was the one day, he goes, who are you talking to? I'm like, oh, Sanofi. He's like, carry on. I mean, I call the companies, I call Bobby, I call the food companies, I call the vaccine companies. I don't believe anything anyone writes on their website. I take the time to call them, and I was not pleased with what they had. They did not have enough children in the studies, and they rolled it out, and it was fast tracked, and they do not have enough evidence. And in fact, when they used it with combination vaccines, it showed increase in respiratory tract infections, which is actually what it's trying to prevent when given in combination. And when I questioned them about that, they're like, well, there weren't that many cases. I'm like, because the study wasn't big enough. So you can't say that that's not, now you're saying it's invalid. I'm like, well, then your whole study is invalid. So the RSV vaccine that's now given to pregnant moms, fast track, the vaccine that's given to recommended to children less than 2 years old. I'm not talking about children who are preemies, NICU, congenital heart disease, congenital lung disease, that if they're like on oxygen, on trachs, G-tubes, that's not what we're talking about. If you have a child with chronic conditions, you need to talk about the RSV vaccine. That's a different conversation, again, because it's an individual thing. But generally speaking, healthy children that don't have chronic medical issues, the RSV vaccine, I don't never jump on, I'm not the first supplement, the first vaccine, the first medication. We're never the first. Let them roll out and see what happens. So
other people try it.
Feel
a
like
lot of people try, because there are a lot of people that are excited to try it, and that's okay. And if you're one of those people, it's okay. Like, you do you, and you do your own investigation. I'm not here to change your mind. I'm just telling you what I recommended doing. Hepatitis A vaccine, if you're traveling across the world, it doesn't kill, hepatitis A doesn't kill you. Again, conversation. Are you okay with being sick for 8 days in Mexico if your children get hepatitis A? Not going to kill you. You might end up in the hospital. Are you okay with that? So you making that decision for you. So those would be the ones that we're talking about. HPV, big discussion. It's very inflammatory. It can cause a lot of things. It has made a big impact in reducing the human papillomavirus, which is the cervical cancer. Of course, there's a screening that also reduces cervical cancer, but then we also now have a lot of esophageal cancer, and esophageal cancer's number one reason for that is actually HPV. Yeah. And there's children who have intractable seizures, and when they did their brain biopsies, is HPV. How do you get HPV? You get it through the tract at birth, and then gets into your vocal cords. And now we can, of course, also later on in life through sexual things that can get into your throat. And anyway, but what I'm saying is it is a prevalent thing, and you have to have that conversation with each parent. I don't give HPV with family histories of multiple sclerosis, major autoimmune issues. The child has issues with autoimmune issues. We're in a delicate medical state. Like, each human's body, all vaccines are medications. And just like we give a medication and we have to evaluate the human, their family history, their environment, and their culture, the same thing we have to do with vaccines.
I love that you look at it from the perspective of being a bio individual, and like every human being is unique versus like this one size fits all approach.
Do you think that the extremely fast process by which the COVID vaccines were, released set like this new precedent? Because RSV came right after that, and to be fair, the sickest our kids have ever been is RSV, so the thing is definitely a joke.
It's definitely a
they're fine, but it seems like just watching that vaccine get rolled, I'm like, wow, this is the speed at which they operate now, and it seems to just be very truncated.
So my child, my middle one, actually was hospitalized with flu Christmas Day. He was then hospitalized again New Year's Day, and then he was on home oxygen for RSV. Wow. So I don't take RSV lightly at all. We were in the ICU, so I understand. I don't take it lightly at all, but I take very seriously the fact that it's being fast tracked. That's just not okay. I totally agree. I thought the first thing that I was like, oh, is this what we're doing now? Now we're just like running to the finish line with all these vaccines. I'm like, I'm not saying that we don't need them. I'm not saying that, but we're rushing. Now we're just rushing. And for a majority of people, when you break down the numbers of RSV, there's certain children, of course, they end up in the hospital. There's certain children that were severely affected. But when we look at the numbers do not validate the need to rush a vaccine.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I have so appreciated all of the incredible insights that you have given us on this show. And like, I, again, like feel so aligned to everything you've been talking about. I have one more question for you that I think is really important because we talked so much about food and I kind of just want to connect those dots. And as we wrap things up, I think that there is a disconnect with parents in terms of blood sugar regulation and the ability for our kids to be able to focus and learn at school. It's a question that I personally get all the time. And it's like, oh, what are you feeding your kids for breakfast? And it's like, I actually wake myself up probably like 30 to 45 minutes earlier than I would if I was just rushing in the car. But it is so important for me because like, I don't want my kid to go to school and be like, West, why are you not focusing? Why are you not learning? Why are you getting bad grades? And I know I'm setting him up early. He's only 4, but it's like, I want him to have the focus. So talk about how impactful setting the tone for their blood sugar is, what we're feeding them in the morning is on their capacity to learn and ability to focus.
Oh, absolutely. As a, when I shared with my middle one who was a disaster in school. Lordy, he made it to 20. This is amazing. It's awesome. But I've always gotten up early. Like my high schooler, I'm up at 5:30 in the morning because we're making smoothies with protein, with lots of plant points. As I talked about the lunch, but we have to set them up with a solid foundation for breakfast. Now, again, a lot of people get upset where they're like, well, sometimes you need meds. We're not saying sometimes you don't need meds. Absolutely. The reason modern medicine is here, and we're so appreciative, because there's some people that truly need medication. Absolutely. However, the ADHD medicines are overprescribed. And one of the things is that I've had so many patients in my traditional practice who would not change their diet. They just wanted the medication. I'm like giving children Lucky Charms and Cinnamon Toast Crunch and Pop-Tarts and toaster strudels for breakfast. With that amount of sugar, they're going to crash within 90 to 45 minutes. By the time they get to school, they're so out of whack completely. And then you look at their lunch, and this used to be my children's lunch, was Uncrustables, Nature Valley granola bars, the yogurt tubes, you know what I'm talking about?
Go-gurt.
Go-gurt, thank you. And a juice box. I calculated how much sugar. I was giving them 50 grams of sugar. 50 grams of sugar at lunch. And then I was like, I don't know why Jake is eating his pencils and is underneath a chair at school again, And then it was his teacher, actually, who pointed out when he was in 5th grade, by that point, we've been on the thing for about 6 years. So the teacher in 5th grade, when I walked to his teacher conference, I said, I'm Jake Temple's mom. And she was like, oh, he's amazing. He's fabulous. I mean, he raises his hand, he waits his turn, he helps other kids. And she goes on, and I was like, I'm sorry. This sounds like an amazing kid, but I'm Jake Temple's mom. I think you got the kids confused. Like, can you, probably your files are wrong. And she was like, why do you say that? And I shared with her, what a disaster he used to be. And she literally stopped and goes, can I ask you, what do you feed him at home? And I was like, oh, what? Oh, well, where do I begin? Let me tell you about his smoothie in the morning. By then we were done with the ice cream. I would discuss the smoothie. I told her about the lunch and the dinner and all the changes we have made. And she goes, well, don't you think that he's a different child now because of all the changes you've implemented since he started kindergarten? And, that's why I don't treat my own children. I was like, righto. So the teacher actually paused and took a moment to take a dietary history of a child who used to be a major problem in the elementary school and pointed out the fact that his neurological outcome has completely changed because of diet changes that we made. So it makes an enormous difference what we put in our children's body. Whatever you put in, that's what comes out. And when we put in a ton of sugar and they're throwing tantrums on the ground, and then we get mad at them for tantrums, like giving drugs to the drug addict, and then we're mad because they're useless. What?
Yes.
Well said.
I'm like, wait. And then they're like, well, they cry because they want sugar. Well, I cry because I would like a vodka tonic in the middle of the day, but I'm not going to be drinking that, They're like, well, they want, they're like, but they like the sugar. I'm like, I'm sure I would like weed too, but I'm not also going to be smoking a joint in the middle of my day because I like it. Like, what is with this? The children like it, therefore we give it to them. No,
Yes.
No, we don't do that.
This has been like the best like ending, I feel like, to this show. I swear I saw somebody who like I like and respect, and she's a nutritionist, like certified. And she said the other day, oh, I just don't want my daughter to have issues with food. So I let her pick whatever she wants for dinner. So we have, the last 3 nights she's chosen chocolate ice cream for dinner. And I'm like,
No.
like, where are we letting these kids like make the choices? Like, they need guidance. That's why we're parents. And so I think that, everything that you've shared today has been beyond helpful. Truly, like, what so many of our listeners are here for is not just advice for their own health, but their children's health. And I love your approach. So thank you so much for everything that you've shared. Can you tell us a little bit about your book and where people can find you and learn more about all of the things that you share?
Absolutely. It's been so great to chat with you. I get very excited, as you can tell. Yeah, you can find me at your local Target, Costco, Walmart. This is what I do. It's actually what I do on weekends. I go shopping because, to you guys' points, knowing and doing are very difficult. So I go and make videos about don't buy this, buy this. I've already done the ingredient reading. I've already done the research. So I show you what to buy. I try to be cost conscious by going to stores that are also cost conscious and trying to make your parenting life easier, because it's not about making it harder. It takes a village to raise healthy kids. We cannot do it on our own. We have to rely on wonderful people like you guys, on great podcasts, on great Instagrammers that are actually doing the hard work. So don't reinvent the wheel. Follow great people and just do what they're doing. It's much easier. And then my book is Healthy Kids in an Unhealthy World, where I give you practical tips on how to raise kids, how to choose rice, how to choose olive oil, what avocado oil should you get, how to do screen time at night, why children should sleep, why should they play outside more, how do you get kids to play outside more, what sunscreen should you use, what about bug spray, should you use fluoride, I don't know, what about fast food. When Easter comes along and Halloween, what do you do? How do you approach those holidays without being, making the children completely nutso and afraid of all foods? So I try to give, and it's
All
like
those answers.
right. It's like the chapters are 3 pages long, all bullet points. I wrote it with a mom of 4 children in mind, who's working a full-time job and running a side gig, to be able to go, oh, I'm reading a chapter, check that, or take it as a reference to the store and be like, oh, got it. I know what to do.
I love that. Like an easy read where you get like practical tips. That's amazing. I love that so much. But we'll link everything up in the show notes. And thank you again so much for being with us today. This was such a pleasure. We so appreciate your time. I can't wait for this episode to go live.
Thank you.
It's been awesome. Thank you all guys so much.
I really hope that you enjoyed that episode. You can follow me on Instagram at Wellness by Kelly, or head over to our website, wellnessbykelly.com. Sign up now for the Wellness by Kelly 7-day free trial on our app, or head over to our course and now get 20% off the course or 10% off of the membership with the code Balancing Chaos, all one word, BALANCINGCHAOS. In our course, you'll get access to an emailed lab review plus protocols built out to help you heal with whatever hormonal imbalance you're struggling with. With our membership, you'll receive a library of content with our app with low-impact workouts, blood sugar balancing recipes, and mindfulness meditations, all designed to help you balance your hormones and help you feel like you are living your most beautiful, joyful, and vital life. If you like the show, please leave a rating and review. That is the best way to help the show grow and get to more listeners. We hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next week.